Hi, my speech is on Janis Joplin. On stage, I make love to 25,000 people, then I go home alone. I believe this quote really gives us a look into who Janis was. It showed even though she had a huge fan base, she was a very lonely woman. In this speech, I'll tell you about Janis's rise to fame while struggling with her self-esteem, loneliness, depression, and drug usage. Janis rose to fame very quickly, but her end came just as fast, sadly. Janis started playing Janis fell in love with music at a very young age. She used it as an escape from all her problems in high school. In high school, she had dealt with a lot of bullying and um, low self-esteem, depression, and things like that. And she used music as a way to kind of comfort herself. She didn't start playing music until after high school when she was in college. She only went to college for a year, but while she was in college, she started playing blues music in coffee shops in Texas, where she was born. Later, she moved to San Francisco and began singing in coffee houses there. While in San Francisco, though, Janis um, started picking up different drugs, experimenting with different drugs. She ended up favoring amphetamines to help with her weight because they thinned her out. Janis was also a pretty heavy drinker, and they said she could always keep up with the boys. Um, Janis went back home for a while to sober up in 1965. And when I back home, she began singing with a Waller Creek Boys trio from Austin. This is where she began to really develop her harsh and raspy voice that she became so famous for. By playing with the trio in 1966, she was approached about playing with a band in San Francisco called Big Brother and Holding Company. This band would end up being Janis's breakout band. They toured all over California doing small gigs, but in 1967 at a festival held in Monterey, California, Janis's band was discovered. Pretty much, the fans loved them, and Janis and Big Brother and signed a record to Columbia Records. Through 1967 and 1968, Big Brother developed a pretty successful tour. They toured the whole country and ended up in New York, which was a big thing for Janis in February 18th of 1967. Um, During this whole thing, Janis started to finally feel at home on stage, but she continued to battle her self-esteem. The whole band was using drugs and drinking pretty heavily because their income was increasing, and it was kind of a rough time for her. They released a second album in 1968 called Dope, Sex, and Cheap Thrills. The album was later um, shortened to Cheap Thrills because of the provocative title. And now the heading read Janis Joplin and Big Brother Band and Holding Company. Janis was getting bigger than the band, and the band wasn't liking it. In December of 1968, the band decided to split up. The Billboard still had their record on top, but because the drugs were so bad, that with the band and Janis, things just weren't going well, and everybody wasn't getting along, so they decided just to break up. Janis Janis was still high on top. She signed to another band right away called the Cosmic Blues Band. I read Janis Joplin and the Cosmic Blues Band, but she still was having a very hard time with her drugs and depression. Her self-esteem was always an issue. She was always known as not really a girl, but one of the boys because she wasn't that pretty or that standoutish. But Janis, I think, also was one of the women that changed the way women were looked at in the 60s because she wasn't the pretty little, you know, she was just Janis, and she had a different deep voice, and she really changed um, how people saw women in the 60s. After joining Cosmic Blues Band, Janis and the Cosmic Blues Band released an album called "I Got Them Old Cosmic Blues Again, Mama." It was released in 1969, and this old album went gold. but the band again only stayed together for about a year. Just Janis is just bigger than most of these people she played with, so it was hard to stay. In 1970, on April 4th, Janis did a reunited concert with Big Brother and Holding Company. She also is working on a new band called Full Tilt Boogie. She's hoping that this band was going to be the band that really, she felt it was going to really reflect her voice and her as a singer. Her career was growing really quickly and things were looking good for Janis overall, but her drug problem was still just a constant problem. She was always battling drugs, and now heroin was her drug of choice. And she was a pretty heavy drinker. Um, Sadly, Janis was found dead in her motel room at the Landmark Hotel on October 4th in 1970. She had died of an accidental heroin overdose. And if you go and read, I didn't really read the details because it's just really a gruesome way she died. It was very sad because um, she was only 27 years old, and it was she was alone basically when she died. So Janis, after Janis' death, she released one last album called her Pearl album. It was the best-selling album of 1971, and in 1995, Janis was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Janis Joplin was a legend, and Janis Joplin was a person. Someone that grew up to make music not only changed the style of women singers of the 60s, but changed the way women were looked at. Janis became a legend in her own time, and sadly, it brought to a downfall. I came to a downfall, which led to a sad and lonely end. I think one of the saddest things about Janis Joplin's death is not that she died at such a young age, because I think that if she hadn't died so young, we she wouldn't have been as big as she was. She wouldn't have been, still listened to today. I think the saddest thing is that Janis lived alone, and that's how she died, alone.